A stray dog named Max was a smart and resilient dog who knew exactly where to find food. Max roamed the streets of Cambridge, USA, and his favorite place to scavenge was the main street, where restaurants left scraps in trash cans. That morning, something was different. In the middle of the trash cans, his senses suddenly sharpened. Behind one of the barrels, against a brick wall, was an old blanket. Max, curious as always, slowly approached. He sniffed the air and immediately recognized the scent of humans. This made him alert. Although he didn't dislike people, he also didn't particularly trust them. In the 9 years he lived on the streets, Max saw the cruelty that humans were capable of. He himself had been a victim of mistreatment several times. Still, there was something different about this smell. It wasn't the same strong, menacing smell he normally associated with adult humans. It was something softer, almost imperceptible. His instincts told him it was something tiny, fragile, and defenseless. Max moved even closer, pressing his nose against the package for more information. What he discovered made his canine heart race. Even if it was a human, if he didn't do something, the creature would die. After a few moments of hesitation, Max made a decision. He sniffed the blanket again, trying to better understand what was inside. Then, as carefully as possible, he turned the bundle so he could gently grasp it with his mouth. Max knew he now had a mission. Whatever was on the blanket moved a little and then went completely limp. In his canine brain, it was time to make the next decision. What should he do? Max knew he needed help, but it was too soon. The restaurants were still closed, and that meant no one was around. As much as he wanted to remain indifferent, he knew he needed human help. The small figure on the blanket twitched again, and Max realized the urgency of his mission. There was a strange building a few streets away where he sometimes foraged for food, and he knew from experience that there were always people there, no matter the time. He then decided to take the package to that place. Max moved quickly through the almost deserted streets, carrying the blanket with the utmost care. When he rounded the last bend 5 minutes later, he saw he was right. There were many people there. Some wandered around the parking lot, others ran through the sliding doors. A large vehicle approached from the left. It had flashing red lights and made a terrible sound. Max immediately walked towards the sliding doors. Upon arriving at Cambridge Hospital, Max was met with an agitated scene. A shift change was taking place. A patient was being taken from an ambulance to one of the emergency rooms, and the receptionist behind the counter called the emergency doctor on duty over the intercom. At that moment, she noticed the dog. The sight of a dog with a package in its mouth made her jump. A dog had no place in an emergency room, she thought. This would inevitably cause a distraction, and this was not an environment where distractions were welcome. She came out from behind the counter and immediately started shooing the dog away. Max realized that the woman was trying to scare him. She didn't even look at the package in her mouth. Instinctively, he wanted to throw the blanket and its contents on the floor and leave. But for some reason, he decided to look for someone else. He deftly avoided the angry woman and ran into another room. It was the break room. 3 women were drinking coffee. At first, they didn't notice the dog. But when he finally showed up, 2 of them immediately started shooing him away, just like the lady behind the counter had tried to do. The little package in her mouth moved again, and Max looked hopefully at the 3rd woman. She looked at him in surprise. Then she got up from her chair, walked towards him, and spoke in a soft voice. Max liked her immediately. She wasn't like the others. Then he let her get closer. When he was sure he had her full attention, he gently dropped the package to the floor and took a step back. Laura Bennett had worked at the hospital for almost 10 years, but she had never seen anything like this before. This animal's behavior probably had something to do with the package in its mouth. When he dropped it to the floor and took a step back, she knew this was important. She could tell by the condition of the fur that it was a lost animal. Laura didn't want to scare the animal, but she also knew that she needed to get her hands on the small package that was on the floor as quickly as possible. She took 2 more steps forward and spoke to the dog in a low voice. He took another step back. She felt like he was trying to give her access to the rolled-up blanket. He wouldn't relax until she looked inside. As she knelt on the floor and carefully unpacked the package, tears welled up in her eyes. It was the last thing she expected, but she knew what it was before she even took off the last layer of the blanket. It was a little baby, just a few days old. He was barely breathing, and his skin was blue from the cold. Laura immediately took action. She shouted to the receptionist behind the counter to call a doctor, adding that a child was in critical condition. She warmed her hands by rubbing them and tapped the baby's chest and the soles of her feet to see if there was any reaction. Anything. However, the child had a heartbeat, and that gave him hope. When the doctor arrived, she walked away. He checked the heartbeat and listened for signs that the baby was breathing. Laura exhaled slowly and turned her attention to the dog. She praised him for his behavior and held out her hand, hoping he would let her touch him. This was unusual for Max. This woman tried to touch him. Normally, he would never allow this. But he liked her. He knew in his heart that she was kind. However, he had no idea that what happened next would change his entire life. When Laura brought her hand even closer, the dog relaxed. She placed her hand gently on his head and began to scratch his ears. And when she turned to grab a jacket from the hanger, he followed her. Laura smiled as the dog sat and watched her put on her jacket. Then she turned and went to the door. "You come with me?" she asked over her shoulder as she patted the side of her leg. Max understood and followed her out the door. Max's journey took him to Laura's house, a place he never imagined he could call home. In the first few days, he explored every corner of the house, still suspicious, but little by little he began to feel safe and comfortable. Laura prepared a warm bed for him and always left fresh water and quality food available. He quickly adapted to the new routine, learning to trust the person who welcomed him with open arms. But the changes didn't stop there. 3 months later, Laura came home from work with a small bundle in her arms. Max recognized the smell immediately and jumped with excitement. The little girl in his arms was the same one he had found wrapped in an old blanket in the alley behind the Italian restaurant. Laura adopted the baby and decided to give the little creature a new life with lots of love and care, just as she had done with Max. Adopting the baby brought a new dynamic to the house. Max curiously watched Laura's every move as she took care of the child. He watched her feed the baby, change his diapers, and rock him to sleep. Max felt a special connection to the baby, as if he understood that they had both been rescued by Laura and given a second chance at life. He often lay beside the crib, like a silent guardian, watching over the baby's peaceful sleep. Laura, in turn, couldn't be happier. She felt fulfilled seeing the joy and security she had provided for Max and the baby. The gratitude in Max's eyes and the baby's innocent smile every morning were the greatest gifts he could receive. Their story spread throughout the hospital, and many of Laura's co-workers admired her dedication and love for the 2 rescues. Max's life had changed in unimaginable ways. From a suspicious and lonely street dog, he transformed into a beloved member of a new family. He now had a home, people who loved him, and most of all, a mission to protect and care for the baby he had saved. And he took this mission seriously, always by his baby's side, always attentive, always present. The story of Max and the baby he saved touched many people's hearts. It was proof that, even in the most desperate situations, compassion and the instinct to protect the weakest can prevail. Laura knew there was something special about Max from the moment she saw him. He wasn't just a street dog. He was a hero, a savior, a 4-legged angel who had come into her life to transform everything for the better. Now, Max was no longer a stray dog on a mission. He was a beloved member of Laura's family, a loyal protector, and a faithful friend. And as he watched the baby grow, he knew he had found his place in the world. He was at home.